Hello, I'm Sarah. This is Hardcover Hearts, and I'm here with not my week of reading video where I talk about what I read, what I'm currently reading and about to read, but instead this is more of a recent reads video. I think I made mention that when I got back from Europe, work just became incredibly intense, very challenging, very stressful, and I have not had a lot of time to really enjoy my reading, relax into a read. Certainly didn't have time to really reflect, to document, gather all of the thoughts, do a video, edit, and put it up. So I decided that I was going to wait until I had a small collection and then kind of use that as a jumping off point to kind of get back in. I find that anytime that I'm away from BookTube for a while, coming back reminds me of Double Dutch, the game of Double Dutch, where you're not really sure at what point you're supposed to jump back in. And it's awkward. You run the risk of tangling yourself up. So hopefully I don't do that in this video too much. All right, so let's get straight into it. The first book I want to talk about it was phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. And I think it continues what I'm noticing as a kind of new genre or subgenre in literary fiction, which is the difficult mother-daughter relationship, that relationship specifically. So a book about this specifically that the book I'm going to talk about in a second reminded me of was Burnt Sugar by Avni Doshi. They both have daughters wrestling with these mothers that in some senses failed themselves, failed them, definitely didn't give them the upbringing and the grounding and the support that they needed growing up. And a reckoning happens. So this was Burnt Sugar, very difficult to read, very good. And this book that I'm talking about has won a ton of things. It has been shortlisted for the Rathbones Folio Prize. It won the Observer, the Book of the Year in the Observer, Daily Telegraph, Irish Times, Guardian, White Review, Evening Standard, Big Issue, TLS, Week, and New Statesman. It's Gwendoline Riley's My Phantoms. And this cover is so remarkably well suited for this book. Not only was this powerfully, beautifully written, so the craftsmanship of this novel is fantastic, but the subject matter was really powerful. It was cringeworthy. It was painful, infuriating sometimes, but really, really well told. We have the story of Bridget as the daughter and Hen, or Helen, as the mother. And we learn about Bridget through her young life, and she's recounting her relationship with her parents. And her parents were pretty awful, emotionally manipulative, psychologically dangerous, just not good people to themselves or to others. Her father used her as an accessory, as an accompaniment to do other things. And so she was an unwitting accomplice to a lot of behavior that I think would be difficult for a young girl to really deal with. And a lot of mental gamesmanship and playing with her mind. And it's led her to be very reserved and very guarded and to have very strong boundaries. Her mother, on the other hand, is a socially gregarious person who really wants to be out there, wants to be loved, wants to be seen, wants to be doing things, and is always putting on these airs, but refuses to see Bridget, does not see her, just kind of ignores her. And it all comes to a head later in life when Bridget is an adult. She's living in a different town, and her mother starts going through some health problems. And her mother wants to get closer and wants to know why they don't have a relationship. And her mother seems to be really ignorant of all of the damage that she's caused. So a reckoning is coming, just like as I mentioned in Burnt Sugar. I was incredibly moved by this book. It will sit on my shelf as something that I think speaks very poignantly about a very specific relationship. I really appreciate a book that goes deep into a specific type of character and doesn't universalize, but you really feel the frustration and you really feel and learn something about characters. I think the characters were incredibly well drawn. And no one really comes out looking great, which is also an interesting take. It was powerful. I absolutely found it to be a phenomenal read. Okay, so let me go to one next, a completely different read. So finished that, and I needed a little bit of a palate cleanser. So I saw this on audio in my public library catalog and thought, I tried the first one from this author before. This author, his name is Rachel Hawkins is her name, and she likes to do retellings. And so, but it's not in the specific way that you expect. After reading Demon Copperhead by Barbara Kingsolver, I will say, I think I'm going to be more generous with the types of retellings that are expansive, that allow it to be a hint of an idea that spurns something else on. I think I made mention in one of my videos where I talked about Demon Copperhead that I felt that it was too beat for beat for beat, and that it was building off of the skeleton that was already created by David Copperfield. And therefore, it didn't leave a lot of space for me to experience something new. I was always aware that I was reading the two things together in essence. But with the way Rachel Hawkins does it, is she allows for more of a nuance, more of a wink and a nod, maybe a shadow, perhaps, of the original classic that lends to the current one. But it's not so on the nose that it makes it difficult to enjoy it on its own merits. And I will say its merits are very beach read, thriller. This is not high literary reading, but it's fun. Okay, so with that said, the first one that I had read was The Villa. I think I'm going to consider that a better experience than I originally rated it. This one is The Wife Upstairs. And this is, if you're familiar with their classics, this is the famous Bronte story, Jane Eyre, and this is kind of alludes to, nods to, winks at that one. But we don't have the same type of character. We don't have Jane in the same morally strong, upright, thoughtful woman. What we have here is this Jane is kind of a schemer. She's been raised in the foster care environment, and she has landed herself in Alabama. And she's in this very wealthy community, and she's been working at the cafe at a local coffee shop, and just finds herself as a dog walker in this very exclusive, elite, private community. So there's a lot of really snarky, funny bits about the vapidness of this specific enclave of people, and class and conformity and the rigidity of their lifestyle and the pecking order. All of that comes through. She sets her sights on a man that she thinks she has a little bit of chemistry with, and he is very wealthy, and he's a new widow because his wife recently died. The Wife Upstairs, not really a surprise there, right? So it's the story of how she entraps him, or kind of starts into a relationship, but he's not really as innocent as she thinks. And then after we've met her and we're fully in her story, all of a sudden we start to have some chapters of the wife be. And B is also not who she was portrayed to be through the folklore that has come out about her in this community. And so I don't want to give too much. It's a thriller. It does not follow the points and the key intersections of plot that happen in Jane Eyre. So you don't have to worry about that. So you can just read this and see the shadow there and enjoy it, but don't read too much into the classic, I should say. So for me, this was fun. It was light. It was exactly what I needed for a palate cleanser. Not high literary merit, but enjoyable for exactly what it is, which is a breezy summer thriller read. Now I'm going to turn to something that is not summer. You don't talk about a modern Russian classic and talk about summer. I did a phenomenal buddy read with Cathie, and we were reading The Master and Margarita. This is my copy. I think I've made mention before that my husband knows the artist who did this. And let me show you, just really gorgeous artwork here. Hopefully you can see all of that. This is by Chris Conescu, and he's a famous tattoo artist who also does other types of graphic arts. So when Cathie, I think I'd made mention of having this, and Cathie and I said, oh, well, let's read that together. So we put it on our schedule and actually made it work, which I'm very happy about because it was a delight. It was an absolute delight reading with her. And she has all of the aspects that I lack in coming into a book like this. So I have not read a lot of Russian literature, and I most certainly do not have any understanding previous to this book of text that is very heavily influenced and leveraged in the creation of this book. And that is Goethe's Faust story. And so Cathie was really has been interested in the Russians, knows a lot about Faust, and really was able to fill in a lot for me in reading this book. And I also love when you're doing a buddy read, if someone appreciates the pieces that you don't really get or enjoy as much, and they can speak really enthusiastically, thereby giving you a perspective of that you probably hadn't even considered or thought about. And so she did all of that for me and more. So about the book, okay. As I made mention, this is a modern Russian classic. This was published in 1966, 1967, but it was heavily censored. And it wasn't until 1973 that the original was made available. There are 3 stories intertwined into this one book, and they're very tonally different. And so you would have these very dynamic shifts in reading that I think I found very interesting. And it allowed me to escape maybe one of the tones that I wasn't enjoying so much. More to come on that. So the first storyline is about the devil arriving in Moscow with his henchmen, which includes a human-sized cat that speaks. And they kind of wreak havoc and play a lot of pranks and tricks and do a lot of things in Moscow to a bunch of people. Then the second storyline we have is completely different. It shifts back to a historical time, and it's a very realistic look at Pontius Pilate and talks about the crucifixion. And it's written in such a completely different way. It's very serious. It's very somber, menacing. And so you can see the shift automatically between what I mentioned first and then this new section. And then the third is a love story between a writer, the master, and his married lover, Margarita. One of the things I liked best was how he alluded to difficulties of life during Soviet Union. Things like the bureaucracy and the paperwork, things like people just disappearing because they've been taken by the secret police. The kind of authoritarianism, propaganda, things like that. That's always stuff that I love in literature. And so I really resonated with those elements of the book. I also loved, there is a section where one of the characters becomes enchanted in the occult and is changed by this magical cream that they put on. And the absolute debauched joy and decadent manifestation of this person's new power and kind of stepping into themselves as this new powerful creature, I just found delightful. Absolutely delightful. All of those scenes with the occult, it reminded me of Lolly Willowes, about how this kind of person just finds the devil and completely changes and gets really excited at their new life. Very much like that. So it was this just joyous, fantastic writing that I absolutely loved. And I found the scenes of the crucifixion to be stripped of all the mythology and stripped of all of that heightened language that exists in the Bible, and just really talking about this man as he's looking at the crucifixion and as one of the disciples, but it's not really talked about there. And the stripping away all of that and just talking about this very human, horrific thing that used to happen in ancient times was profound. Very, very, very moving. But to me, I couldn't fully embrace the book because the mad hijinks of the devil and all of his cronies, and I was weary of all of that. It was interesting to a certain point, and I really enjoyed the beginning because it was so wild and outlandish, but it kind of wore me down after a bit, and I wasn't as enthralled. But I'm so glad I read it. I get its value. I can imagine this must have been a marvel when it came out in 1967, even a censored version. And then 1973, my God. So I get its place. I'm so glad I read it. And I'm especially glad that I read it with you, Cathie. Thank you so much for joining me in this adventure. And then another book that I just finished. We're finishing up our last check-in today. So when this goes up tomorrow, this will all be completed. This is the first book in my Helen deWitt author series that I'm doing. This is The Last Samurai. Oh, this is an interesting book. This is such an interesting book. It's a very thick book. And so I expected it to be dense, really difficult to get through, but it's a breeze. I would read it so quickly, but the material is not necessarily easy. There's a lot of challenging aspects to this because what she's positing in this book, it's a novel, but it's a novel about the stifling of, in modern society, of intellectualism, of the pursuit of knowledge, of really being excited about learning and trying new things. And people have set the bar so low for themselves in terms of learning things and being excited about learning that it's having a negative effect on us all. And so she's pushing this theory through these characters. And we have two main characters. It's Sibylla and her son, Ludo. Sibylla is a kind of frustrated and frustrating character. She's a single mother to Ludo through a one-night stand that she had with this man. And she's an introvert. She's brilliant, absolutely brilliant, but very, very difficult. She believes in free will, and she believes, she kind of raises Ludo to explore his interests, and she does not see that there's an age to begin something, and she just jumps right in with learning. And he just ends up being a very, very precocious, smart, gifted child who she teaches Greek to. And so he reads the Iliad and the Odyssey in Greek. He's interested in other languages. He starts to read Japanese and Finnish. He reads wildly, randomly, following his whims. And she does not believe in sending him to school. And so she's teaching him by herself, which is difficult because they're incredibly poor. In order to do this, she wants to focus on him. She wants to make sure that she's investing in him and his intellectual pursuits. So she takes jobs typing up horrible books, just boring, horrible nonfiction books in order to pay the rent of this dilapidated, basically unheated home that they live in London. And we then flip to Ludo, and Ludo, we start to hear his voice coming through. And he is on a quest to find out who his father is. Sybilla's not telling him anything because she's embarrassed. She's embarrassed at who he is, because he's not a very successful intellectual person. And in realizing that he would need to have some role models about what masculinity was, she presents to him, since he was very, very young, the Akira Kurosawa film, The Seven Samurai. And in that is one of the reasons that it sparks the interest in Japanese. And you can see her trying to establish some kind of way, a substitute for him that solves some of the questions that he might need to ask. But of course, it's not enough. And so he goes on a quest to find his father. This is, as I mentioned, it's an easy read in the sense that you can read it quickly, but there are blocks. And when I mean blocks, I mean blocks of text in Greek. There are blocks of text about aerospace, about different kinds of explorers' trips, all of these kind of intersposed into the text that kind of give you a sense of what he is actually learning. I didn't understand, why is this here? What am I supposed to get from it? And it was only in reading one of our fantastic people in the group read connected us with a link to a interview where she said that when she wrote this book, it was before the internet. And so she would just learn these things and think, my God, why doesn't everybody know this? I should tell more people. And so she found ways to kind of interject this into the story. And she even said in there, it's kind of what Twitter is, a function of Twitter now, which I thought, well, maybe not right now, but that's what it was recently, right? This is a book that I admire tremendously. She is a craftswoman. It's expansive in scope, but really tight in character and tight in craft. And I found it to be a remarkable achievement. And I personally was spurned on. So, I think I've made mention here a few times that I'm reading French. I have a French tutor. I've been doing Duolingo for 3 years. I have a 3-year streak going now with Duolingo. Just found out this morning. And so I'm interested in language, and I've always been told, don't confuse yourself by reading too many languages. Just like I was always told, don't read books all the same time. You'll confuse yourself. You should really just focus on one and then start to the next. And this book helped me reject that notion. I mean, look, I completely changed my life when I started reading multiple books at the same time, with my only rule being not the same genre, right? Because otherwise that is confusing. But other than that, there's no reason that I should be self-imposing these kind of limits on myself. And so the same thing held true with language. So as of last week, I have started Italian private tutoring lessons as well. So I'm taking French and Italian. And the joy that I felt, the personal joy I felt was immense, that I have reached that pinnacle where I'm ready to do that, and I can, and I am. And is it easy? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. But is it fulfilling? Is it a challenge? Am I excited by it? Yes, 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 yes. So thank you, Helen deWitt, for inspiring me to an intellectual pursuit without any reason to use it other than traveling, right? So for that, I'm grateful. And we will be continuing on next month with the next book, which is Lightning Rods. You'll see it in a second. So again, I have so much respect for the people that I read this with. Reading something like this with a group of people that are so astute and so thoughtful. And I think many of us had the same feeling. You know, we're used to different types of books. And she breaks a ton of rules with this book. But it's intriguing and it's thoughtful. And I'm glad I read it. And I'm glad I read it with the group. So thank you all who joined very, very much. So that's what I completed. Let me show you what I'm currently reading. So I think I've made mention that I've been reading Zola's Rougon Macao series. And I convinced Leo from Leo's Little Book Life to read it with me. So he started the first 3. And as I knew he would, he loves them as deeply as I do. And he's like, oh yes, we have to read them together. So now we're at book 4. And so we're joining forces. This is The Conquest of Plazas by Emile Zola. And this is translated by Helen Constantine. And I'm here to tell you, this is an absolute riot so far. This is the story of this priest who comes with his mother. And he's a very odd priest. He's kind of withdrawn, a little sullen, very quiet, very observing. He and his mother move into the upstairs floor of More and Mas' home. And their home, they were traditionally atheists, didn't really care about religion, didn't care about any of that. Well, all of a sudden, they've got priests living above, and it's creating havoc in the family. It's also changing dynamics in this town. But this priest is not what they think. And so much of this is about gossip and about appearances and about machinations and motivations and all of that. Laugh riot. We're about halfway through. Loving it so far. Stay tuned for more. So yeah, that's it so far. I would love to know, have you read any of these? What were your thoughts? And do you have any book recommendations for me that you think I should know based on my reactions to any of these? Have a great reading week ahead, and I look forward to talking to you soon. Bye-bye.